Do you consider yourself a Marxist? I don't know what it means to be in anything. There are plenty of elements of Marxist theory that I think are highly agreeable, and there are things that he said that I disagree with. I imagine that's the case with basically any like theorist's works, you know. So I don't. I certainly I have a stronger connection to Marx's theories than I do almost any other theorist, you know, in terms of my affinity. Yeah, I'm a centrist between Marxists and anarchists. You know. Marx thought that class conflict was a feature of the world. I don't think, like, that wasn't just a feature of capitalism, and he didn't fight against inequality. In fact, Marx's issue wasn't with inequality. Marx's issue was with tyranny. Marx believed that capitalism, by being like a fundamentally autocratic economic system, denied people the freedom to express themselves and live like, you know, authentic lives. Essentially, it restricted their ability to do what they will. He believed that inequality was often a product of this unfreedom, but if the freedom was restored, there would still be inequality. It would just be inequality within a better framework. People often talk about Marx wanting like total equality or even equality at all. Not true. Marx did not write in favor of equality as a virtue in and of itself. He thought that equality was a product, a downstream product, an emergent characteristic of greater freedom, and that was what he fought for. I think it's a critical distinction. And I think it sells Marxism a little bit better to understand it not as a fight for equality, but as a fight for freedom, because freedom is something that theoretically everyone should be able to buy, especially Americans. Whereas, like a lot, especially conservatives, like to them, equality, they think it's a dog whistle for like giving black people guns and letting them like steal armchairs from white suburbs or something. I don't know, whatever the fuck they believe. Marx explicitly wrote that egalitarianism is a bourgeois category. Yeah, well, he believed that egalitarianism in and of itself was essentially a way of obfuscating the nature of class conflict, of covering up the antagonism in favor of a sort of performative. How do I put this exactly? He felt that egalitarianism was like patching up the damage rather than fixing the subsystem. Does that make sense? That egalitarianism was like, oh, sure, we live in a fundamentally tyrannical and unfree system, but like that's okay as long as we use the products of that system to try to patch things up a little bit so people feel equal. And that was the issue he had with it. He felt like it was, you know, he felt like it was a band-aid for a real problem, a way of covering it up. And by the way, that's essentially a proto-example of what we call like liberal progressivism. People on the liberal left, you know, like centrist or slightly left-leaning Democrats, who are okay with equality as a concept, but it's always like, you know, giving government loans to black-owned businesses operating in underprivileged neighborhoods for a minimum of 3 years or something. You know, it's always like you don't fix the bedrock, you attempt to address it after the fact. I am a based freedom enjoyer. That's the sort of first principle for me. So he also thought utilitarianism was a bourgeois philosophy. Well, he can't always be right. Marx thought that the specialization of labor was dehumanizing because in our species being, as humans were in a hunter-gatherer state, humans like did a lot of things. Like a modern worker might be incredibly good at one very specific physical or social task and otherwise have very little training in anything. Whereas, like a pre-modern human would have had to have been very good at a great number of things just to survive. They would have had to have been very good at a wide variety of survival, cultivation, and construction and social skills, just to live. Like that's the bedrock. And what Marx argues is that humans are happier when they have the ability to pursue a wider range of interests without it always being some hyper super optimized you know, like, oh yeah, every worker to their most optimal position thing, you know. Obviously Marx does not prioritize economic efficiency over human happiness because that seems kind of like putting the cart before the horse. That seems a little bit silly. Like what are we doing our economy for if not human happiness? I don't know what else we're doing this for. So he essentially argues that an economy or like a system that allows for people to vary a bit more freely. Oh, and by the way, we do see a kind of underdeveloped version of this in volunteer economies, you know? There are people who work like regular service jobs, but are also essential to the local community because they volunteer at a soup kitchen, or they volunteer at like some kind of local... This is why people like almost always like volunteering, by the way. Like, talk to people who do volunteering, they like it. I swear to God, you will like it if you do it too, probably. Not everyone, but like a lot of people do. And it's because it's an opportunity to be helpful and useful and to work towards something that isn't just like your job. You know what I mean? And this is one of the reasons why I've always said, I think that humans like working. You can call it work or labor or whatever you want, but fundamentally, I like it. I think humans enjoy doing a thing that requires some effort if they feel like it's benefiting their community, you know? The pay is just an incentive system, but like at the end of the day, we're kind of built to do that, right? Like we had to have been. Surviving is a lot of work. You know? You can find examples of this in other animals, right? A good example would be cats. Cats will get depressed and will demonstrate like signs of self-harm if they aren't stimulated enough. And stimulation for a cat means playing with them. And play for a cat means practicing hunting, doesn't it? I mean, when you play with a cat, like you have like a little toy or like a bird feather ball or something. And they like playing with the cat is them practicing for the thing that they have to do to survive in like a wild sense, right? Isn't that interesting? Because they'll get depressed if they don't do that. There is nothing on Earth that a cat needs to do. They can just sit still all day. They'll still survive. They don't get their food from hunting if they live indoors, but they still like it. And I think that we like it too. I think that the average human, if given the opportunity, assuming you're physically healthy enough to not feel pain while doing so, would really like the experience of getting out there with a group of well-trained volunteers and helping build a house, you know? Now, obviously, you know, there's a lot of like really technical stuff that goes into house building. So I'm not saying you should just be slapping pipes together or whatever. But if it was like, yeah, like this land is going to be like cleared, like do some tilling, like with a group of like 8 or 9 people who are kind of cool, you know, and it's just like, yeah, you spend like 3 or 4 hours in the sun, just chilling, just vibing. And afterwards you're like, yeah, that's a big old patch of land that's all flat now. I think people like that, you know? Anyway, just making a point. It should be noted that I believe Marx was actually quite sympathetic to the bourgeois, you know? After all, the bourgeois is as confined to their role as the worker is to theirs. The role of the bourgeois might be larger, more free, and more powerful than the role of the worker, but it is a role nonetheless. And for a person like Marx who loves freedom, that is an issue. I believe Marx wrote, well, I don't know if I could say extensively, but he did write specifically on marriages in bourgeois families. See, peasants marry for love back then. The wealthy married for political gain. Oftentimes people would form courtships for maximum, you know, the aristocrats and the robber barons, they would marry to consolidate empires or to, you know, to sort of, you know, facilitate the acquisition of political power. And Marx is, I think, pretty sympathetic towards that. He says that he thinks that like the humanity is drained of these people, that they're denied the ability to live free lives and to pursue love as they wish because the stifling confines of aristocracy. You know, yeah, it's very similar to essentially commentary on toxic masculinity. How it's like, okay, you may live as like a member of a privileged class, but that doesn't mean it doesn't come with its downsides. You should do something explaining Marx. I haven't read all of Capital. You know, I feel like I know a good few of his arguments, but there are lots of his arguments that I'm not even aware of. Maybe one day. It's a big read. But you said you read all theory. Oh yeah, sorry, never mind, I did, I forgot. I do think that Marx would be disgusted by the world as it is today, the way his name has been dragged through the mud. Not by the far right people, I think, but by the far left people. I do believe, you know how sock dems are cucked these days? I feel like the fact that like Marxism Leninism has become the dominant leftist strain all around the world. He would be pretty disgusted by that, I think. He would probably be called a revisionist by the people who claim to like him if he was around today. The idea that Marx would have approved of the USSR when Marx's principal arguments were in favor of freedom, and the USSR was one of the most sophisticated police states with like secret police and like, you know, deportation and execution of hundreds of thousands of political prisoners. Like the idea that he would have applauded that is just ridiculous. Not in a million, billion, trillion years. Yeah. Not ever. Never, ever, never, 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 ever, never. Is Lenin good? Lenin is smart, and he was a good writer, though I don't agree with everything that he said. He's also a monster. Basically, there are two Lenins. Lenin pre-revolution and Lenin post-revolution. Pre-revolution, when he was doing his writing, you know, or well, not all of it, but, you know, when he was doing some writing, you know, there's some valuable stuff there. Post-revolution, he was an authoritarian. He immediately cracked down on worker councils, executed political enemies. Like, he instantly, like, when Lenin got, you know, when he achieved power, he became like people distinguish between Stalin and Lenin as though Stalin was like the crazy one who took over and ruined everything, but that's not really true. Lenin set everything in motion for what Stalin would later become. And Trotsky was just as bad. Trotsky was insane and a slimy little kiss ass. He would write anything to justify what Lenin did. And I genuinely think that if it weren't for the fact that he and Stalin were competing for power after Lenin's death, I feel like Trotsky would have been he would have been like a yes man for Stalin. Like Stalin would have gulagged people and Trotsky would have been writing really eloquent, really intelligent theory on how it's necessary. Socialism can only be preserved through like the mass execution of political prisoners. The main benefit to like Stalin having won out there is that Stalin is kind of stupid. Trotsky isn't. He's very, very smart. So I feel like Trotsky's intelligent justifying mechanisms of what Stalin did would have created theory that would last today. Like I feel like I'd be arguing with Trotskyists today who would have incredibly eloquent justifications for like ripping the toenails off of people suspected of disagreeing with the socialist leader or something. God. And I am glad that Trotsky took the pickaxe because like it's not because Stalin was better. I'm glad there was only one of them, you know? I'm just not because Stalin was I'm just glad we didn't have to fucking do with the duo team. Jesus. Fucking you think Godskin Duo was a dangerous pair. Holy shit. Trotsky was essential for the revolution. Yo, I'm not saying he wasn't an important figure in the revolution. Even when exiled, he wrote stuff justifying Stalin's annexation of the Baltics. Wait, is that true? Even when Trotsky was exiled, fearing for his life from the secret police controlled by Stalin, he was still writing shit justifying Stalin's authoritarianism? What a fucking cuck, dude. Holy shit. Yeah, Trotsky was totally a bottom moment, yeah.